Welcome to History with Herodotus, where we embark on a journey through the vast expanse of human experience, guided by the threads of time and the whispers of the past. Today, we find ourselves at the threshold of one of the most pivotal moments in human history, the Black Death and medieval society. This is a tale of unimaginable devastation, of societal upheaval, and of the indomitable human spirit that persevered through the darkest of ages. In the early 14th century, Europe was a complex tapestry of feudal kingdoms, city-states, and ecclesiastical domains, all intertwined by a delicate balance of power and commerce. The High Middle Ages had seen a period of relative prosperity, with trade flourishing along the Silk Road in the Mediterranean and the rise of vibrant cities like Paris, Florence, and Venice. However, beneath the surface of this bustling medieval world, tensions were simmering. The Little Ice Age, which began in the 13th century, had brought about a series of crop failures, famines, and societal disruptions that would ultimately contribute to the perfect storm of conditions that allowed the Black Death to spread with such ferocity. In the midst of this turmoil, the city of Constantinople stood as a beacon of trade and cultural exchange between East and West. Its bustling ports and markets were a magnet for merchants, travelers, and sailors from all corners of the known world. It was here, in the early 1340s, that the first whispers of a mysterious and deadly disease began to circulate. The disease, which would come to be known as the Black Death, is believed by many historians to have originated in the vast expanses of Central Asia, where it had been endemic for centuries. The plague, caused by the bacterium Yersinia pestis, was transmitted to humans through the bites of infected fleas that lived on rats and other rodents. As trade caravans and merchant ships traveled along the Silk Road, they unwittingly carried these infected fleas and thus the disease from Central Asia to the ports of Europe. The first recorded outbreak of the plague occurred in 1346 in the city of Kaffa, a Genoese trading post on the Crimean Peninsula. The Genoese merchants who fled Kaffa, carrying the infected fleas with them, would soon bring the disease to the port city of Messina in Sicily. The people of medieval Europe were largely unaware of the horrors that were soon to beset them. They lived in a world of rigid social hierarchies, where the feudal system held sway and the authority of the church was absolute. The cities, with their narrow streets and closely packed houses, were tinderboxes waiting to be ignited by the spark of disease. The lack of sanitation, the dearth of medical knowledge, and the widespread poverty would all contribute to the plague's devastating impact. And yet, even as we gaze out upon this medieval landscape, we must also acknowledge the resilience and adaptability of the human spirit. For in the face of unimaginable suffering, people found ways to cope, to adapt, and to ultimately rebuild their shattered world. As the plague spread its dark wings across Europe, the year 1348 became a watershed moment in the annals of human history. It was a time when the very fabric of medieval society began to unravel, as the disease tore through cities and towns with an unrelenting ferocity. The city of Paris, once a beacon of learning and culture, was now a hotbed of death and despair, with estimates suggesting that over 60% of its population perished in the space of just a few months. In the midst of this chaos, the social and economic structures of medieval Europe began to break down. The feudal system, which had held sway for centuries, was severely strained, as lords and vassals alike fell victim to the plague. The resulting power vacuum led to a surge in peasant uprisings, as the common people, freed from their traditional obligations, began to demand greater rights and freedoms. The English Peasants' Revolt of 1381, although still decades away, had its roots in the social upheaval sparked by the Black Death. One of the most striking examples of the plague's impact on medieval society can be seen in the Flagellant movement, which emerged in the mid-1340s. These radical groups, composed of men and women from all walks of life, would march through towns and cities, whipping themselves into a frenzy of blood and tears as they sought to atone for the sins of humanity. As the chronicler Matteo Viani wrote, "They went in procession, stripped to the waist, with candles and flags, and scourged themselves with whips, crying out, 'Mercy, mercy, Lord!'" This phenomenon, which spread from Germany to England and as far south as Italy, serves as a testament to the profound psychological trauma inflicted by the plague. The economic consequences of the plague were no less severe. With trade and commerce grinding to a halt, the European economy teetered on the brink of collapse. The shortage of labor, caused by the massive loss of life, led to a significant shift in the balance of power between lords and peasants. As the English monk William of Ockham observed, "The scarcity of men has brought about a change in the relationship between masters and servants, for now the servants are as masters." This newfound bargaining power would have far-reaching consequences, contributing to the emergence of a nascent wage labor market and laying the groundwork for the eventual decline of the feudal system. As the plague continued its relentless march across Europe, the year 1349 became a time of great upheaval and transformation. The city of Florence, once a thriving hub of commerce and culture, was now a shadow of its former self, with estimates suggesting that over half of its population had perished. The great poet Petrarch, who had lost his beloved Laura to the plague, would later write, "I have seen with my own eyes the most beautiful and noble city, reduced to a state of utter desolation." This sense of despair and loss, which pervades so much of the literature from this period, serves as a poignant reminder of the human cost of the Black Death. As the plague finally began to recede in the early 1350s, medieval Europe was left to pick up the pieces and confront the profound changes that had taken place. The social, economic, and cultural landscape of the continent had been irreparably altered, with the old certainties of the feudal system crumbling beneath the weight of massive population loss and economic disruption. In England, for example, the Statute of Laborers was passed in 1351, an attempt by the government to regulate wages and prevent the significant increases that had resulted from the shortage of labor. However, this effort ultimately proved unsuccessful, as the new economic reality continued to favor the interests of workers over those of their lords. The flagellant movement, which had reached its peak in the mid-1340s, gradually declined as the plague's grip on Europe loosened, but its legacy lived on in the form of increased piety and a growing sense of disillusionment with the established church. As the historian Norman Cohn once observed, the flagellants were not just a manifestation of mass hysteria, but a symptom of a deeper malaise, a feeling that the world was out of joint and that the old order was crumbling. This sentiment would continue to resonate throughout the late Middle Ages, contributing to the growth of reform movements and the eventual emergence of the Protestant Reformation. As the decades passed, medieval Europe slowly began to rebuild and recover from the devastating impact of the Black Death. The city of Florence, for example, which had been so severely affected by the plague, experienced a cultural and artistic flowering in the 15th century, as writers like Boccaccio and poets like Petrarch helped to lay the foundations for the Renaissance. Similarly, the English economy began to recover, with the growth of a new class of landowners and merchants who would eventually come to challenge the power of the nobility. Despite these signs of renewal, however, the legacy of the Black Death continued to be felt, shaping the course of European history in profound and lasting ways. That's all for today's History with Herodotus. Remember to like, share, and subscribe. And until next time, remember that, to understand the present, we must first understand the past.